Coming up on this episode of Common Denominator.
But then the reality of where I was on a rock face, alone with my climbing partner who wasn't connected to me. And it was like, what do you do with all of that emotion? Like, how do you control this fear and anger and rage and discomfort? And it really came down to being in control of myself.
Hi, and welcome to Common Denominator, where we shine a light on people striving to make the world a better place. Today, a conversation with a truly incredible athlete. Sasha DiGiulian is the most decorated and arguably the best female climber in the world. She's been the female overall world champion twice, the undefeated Pan American champion for a 10-year span, a 3-time U.S. national champion, and she's accomplished over 30 first female ascents. She's also an entrepreneur, a business owner, an environmentalist, and the author of the brand new book, Take the Lead, which just came out this week. Sasha and I just finished an incredible conversation, and what really stood out to me is the maturity and the hard, consistent work that she does day in and day out as a tremendously accomplished female rock climber. So check out the episode. Hi, Sasha, and welcome to Common Denominator.
Hi, how's it going today?
It's going amazing, and it's great to have you here because I always love sitting down with high-performing mindset people. Let's put it that way. So I want to get into meat and potatoes, just top of your mind. What would you say from your journey? What is the number one exhilarating experience, the biggest challenge that you've had up to this point in your life as far as rock climbing, and why?
Right into it. There's so many experiences that come to mind that have really shifted my perspective as I've built my career, including massive injuries. I would say, so at this point, I've traveled to over 50 different countries in pursuit of my sport. And one of the initial journeys that I had that actually kind of changed my trajectory from just a competition climber to more of a big adventure expedition climber to what I do now, which is categorized as free climbing, was a trip that I did in the Dolomites in Italy. And it was my first ever big wall. I had the previous year won the overall female world championship title. It was kind of like exploring what's next in my career. And I'd been at a dinner seated next to this famous mountaineer that maybe some of you guys listening know, Reinhold Messner. And he took the wine menu and he flipped it over at this restaurant. I was in Salt Lake City. And he started drawing this map of this climb that Alex Huber, the German alpinist, had done the first ascent of. And he was like, this is what you need to do as your next. And it was this climb called Bella Vista in the Dolomites in Italy. And I knew nothing about big wall climbing. And the difference of what I was doing was like performing in a plastic controlled arena in competition climbing, and then doing single pitch sport climbing, which is very controlled. You start on the ground, you lower back down from the ground. Big wall climbing is characterized as like big, long days on a wall that can be thousands of feet tall. And during that trip, I learned so much diving into the deep end with no prior knowledge, but being with a climber who had more knowledge than I did. And I was like a sponge to all of these things going wrong and how to interact. And during that month, which actually I do cover quite extensively in the book, but I had this moment where we had reached near the summit and we had gotten off track on the climb. And we were faced with this decision. Do we untie from the rope and free solo our way to the top because there's no point of protection? There's no gear. We're looking at 1,000-foot drop below us. Or do we simul climb? And that would be stay tied into each other and climb. And if one of us fell, hopefully the other could hold them onto the wall. But that's not an ideal circumstance. So down to keep a long story short, for the sake of our time, we decided to untie from the rope and we're climbing. We're looking at like the last less than 200 feet to the top, to the summit. And it's getting late. And I'm climbing, and my left hand and my left foot, which is rock on the Dolomites, the rock is very malleable. So it's very like breaks often. It's limestone. And my left hand, my left foot break. And I remember having this like moment that was like 1,000 seconds in 1 second type feeling where time just like kind of drew out like a slow motion picture playing out. And my gut reaction was to be so angry and like upset and want to be out of this situation. But then the reality of where I was on a rock face, alone with my climbing partner who wasn't connected to me. And it was like, what do you do with all of that emotion? Like, how do you control this fear and anger and rage and discomfort? And it really came down to being in control of myself and being like, all that I can control is my next move. And all that I can control is my progression up the wall and getting to the top and having a positive mindset to get me out of this situation so that I can perform. And so I think that that was one of my big turning points in my mental approach within climbing.
I completely visualized that, and I just got like the biggest chills because I remember, and nothing that compares to it, but my kids laugh about it. But again, no training. I was in Costa Rica. We did the zip line in the rainforest. It was pouring rain, and we just happened to be. I stopped in middle, and just kind of pouring rain. It's 1,000-foot drop, and it's just you and the string. And I remember, like you mentioned that kind of. I've had that a few times in my life, where time doesn't really exist. Just completely slows down, and then you have to make decisions. So I was like, and it's completely, obviously different in each level. But I think of like, first of all, like the free solo experience, and you've had to do that sometimes in order to get your result. What actually goes on in your mind? I mean, you have to know that there's a real risk there.
What I do is free climbing. And the difference of free climbing and free soloing is typically, because I can name the times that I've had to free solo on less than a hand's fingers. Because when I'm climbing with a rope, my rope is solely there for protection. And a part of climbing is I experience exposure on a magnitude of levels that range from feeling irrationally fearful to consequences where I could simply just let go and fall into a rope and I'd be totally fine, to situations where the fall would be quite consequential. And in the situation I described of free soloing, and why it's a very, very small, tiny percentage of climbers that actually do it, is because that risk consequence is just so much higher. Any mistake, even due to the rock breaking, can be, that's it. But I think in general, the broad spectrum of high performing and optimally reaching your limits as an athlete comes down to that mindset and like how you control your mind, whether it's the risk of a fatality or the risk of an injury or the risk of just failing. And what I do for some of my tools, I guess, in my kit is first, visualization is a really big part of how I practice. And that will be imagining myself in these extreme situations and bringing myself through visualization, which could just be me in my office, thinking about it, really going deep. I actually write out situations too. Like I'm a big journaler, and forecasting how I'll operate in my mind before I even get there. But then there's also an element of the unknown in climbing that I can visualize as much as I can about a climb that I've never been on. But the reality is only when I get there will I be able to make that live puzzle piece come together. And so in that frame of work, a lot comes down for me is breathing. Being in control of my breath enables me to make rational decisions and quickly think on my, I guess, toes, not feet, because you're on your tips of your toes of your rubber shoes. What's plan A, B, and C here? If this minute movement doesn't work, how can I kind of reground myself and make a quick decision, game time decision in that moment of what to do next with my body? And then also positive mindset of like what mantra I tell myself. And that'll be different kind of keywords depending what the situation is. If I feel like I need to go and I need to not hesitate, then something that gets me is like, just go, just go. And I'll say that in my mind. Or if I'm in a situation where I'm in a precarious part of a wall and I need to get to that next place where I can place a piecement of protection or clip my rope into a quick draw, I actually count, which I don't know if other people do, but I'll give myself like 1, 2, 3. And it's almost like a distraction in my mind of counting enables me to kind of focus on something else while letting my body do the work, which kind of does overlap into that flow state mentality.
When you're out in the ocean, I know, and you're swimming, even if you could be a good swimmer, the counting strokes helps. And as well as your mind when it comes to breath, because that's your essence. You're breathing. Am I breathing? Am I not breathing? Your mind, it's like, okay, and let me put my mind on breath. It'll do that because that's your essence of your humanity, of who you are. And then that, and it relaxes your nervous system. So it's there's a science to it actually. And but I want to, we've interviewed on the show many high performing athletes, even in business and other things, and there's always this common denominator. And I want to think about this for a second. There's always seems to be a why. There's always something of a reason why they're going on this journey. In other words, society does this, and I'm doing that, and I'm doing it every day, different from everybody else, because what you do is different, right? So, question number 1 is, what is your why? Why do you do what you do?
I think there's 2 answers. One, it's passion. It's what really drives me. It's like what I've loved since I was 6 years old has been climbing and exploring. And then what drives me is my curiosity. I'm just really curious of what my human body is capable of achieving, and also my mind. Like what I think of when I think of what would be a situation where I would regret something. And that's if I felt like I didn't work hard enough, if I didn't apply myself enough to actually finding out what I'm capable of. And so I think that curiosity with the passion kind of come together, because you have to love what you do. I think that's something that for me, yes, I feel like I work days in my life. I don't really abide by that idea of like never work a day in your life and you'll, find your passion of what you love to do. I think that it does come with work. Like there are undoubtedly days that it's tough to train. It's tough to do whatever is associated with my career. But because I'm passionate and because I'm curious about what I'm capable of, I think that passion feeds off of that curiosity. And it keeps driving me. So I don't know if I cheated the question by giving 2.
No,
but for me, that feels like it.
No, I think that's what it is. And I think that it's super hard to answer that question, I find. Even people that are doing things that are way outside the bell curve, because that's touching your core of who you are and your essence as a human. And I know that. It's that pain of regret, understanding I live one time and at the end. And then it's also, what is that catalyst? I always go to that kind of like rock bottom. You hit this rock bottom. It could be when you're 10, when you're 15, this moment in time. And you're like, okay, this thing that I'm going to do will be the thing that'll negate, or I'm going to go on this journey. So I've always questioned, it's like, what happens when you actually arrive? Because I remember there was an executive who worked with Sheryl Sandberg. She was the CEO of Facebook.
Yep.
And she said to this executive, you know what? You've arrived. You finally arrived. You don't have to be in that kind of closed heart space anymore. It's like, and then what happens next? And I'm always like, because you're still living,
Yeah.
and it's like you've done all the work and you've actually got the results in this world. So, it's always something, but I love that is what it is. In other words, your passion, that makes complete sense. This is just what it is, and curious what you can do while here in this world. And I don't think I train martial arts, and I don't think that my coach and I, we were talking about whatever our mind believes is probably 20 times more that we can actually do. And you prove that. Tell me, I know we talked a little bit about your training. What does that look like? Like, what's a typical day in training for you?
First of all, that's amazing that you train martial arts. I think I read this before coming on the show because there's so many parallels, I think, of martial arts and climbing when it comes to training, possibly even more so. I have very sport specific training where that consists of climbing and exposing myself to different terrain outside. It's why I moved from New York City to Boulder, Colorado, because I live in kind of the heartland of a lot of rock year round that I can go and climb and be outside. A lot of my training, I do 5 days a week of cross training with cardio, about an hour to 2 hours a day. A lot of hand strengthening specific exercises. So I'll be like hanging from my fingertips for, say, an hour's routine of what we call hangboarding. And that'll be hanging from like 1 finger, 2 fingers, 3 fingers with weight added, using the quarter tip of your front pad will be what you're trying to strengthen. Because as a climber, everything really comes down to like you holding on with your fingers and having your entire body weight relying on that strength that you can generate from the contact surface on the rock. There's a lot of core training that's involved because the core is the connection of upper body, lower body, and then explosive lifting. So I'll do training for my strength so that I can be more explosive on the wall. And climbing is a strength to body weight ratio sport. So I think that there's been a lot of dialogue within sport and a lot of background, myself included, of going through that journey of finding where is that healthy, because disordered eating, unfortunately, plays a really large role within the climbing sphere, because the shortcut, which I've done and other athletes I know at the top of their field in the World Cup circuit and in different competition avenues and outdoor performances, is that if you don't have that strength, then you have to cut weight. But that's like a very dangerous line to flirt with, because it's a precursor to injury, not good for your long-term health. Nutrition has been something that I've dove really heavily into as a way to get myself out of that negative space of climbing, having that background and lack of knowledge within the space of like how to optimize your performance through performing. So I work with a strength and conditioning team, and then I work with a climbing specific set of coaches. But I think that nutrition and sleep play a huge role in training as well. And it's like been really hard for me to teach myself that too, of like, I need to rest. And I think I've been climbing for 25 years now. And as I've gone through injuries, as I've learned more about my body, that's been something that I've had to incorporate too. It's like the mobility and the stretching and the antagonist work is as important as the lifting, I like to swim. Actually, you mentioned the counting of strokes. I love swimming. That's one of my favorite, cross training hobbies. And hiking and trail running and anything that brings me outside. That's where I feel like I love training the most. So it's kind of a collection of different ways to parcel together with climbing specific.
And so I like that you have to, and that's also a good message. In other words, find what you like that works for you. And I do that. My kids have different routines, different things, but always the core, it is that you are what you eat, right? It's the food. And and you have to be intentional with your sleep. People say, oh, put your phone away. Whatever that mechanism is, you got to actually look at it because your body heals the most while you're sleeping. So for sure, I definitely see that. And I know you've been on many magazines and, you deal with fame. I'm curious because a lot of people, search for that. And how has that journey been for you? Kind of being out there in the spotlight. What do you realistically think about that? What do you feel?
I've had a really rocky road through my career, being exposed at a young age when I was a young teenager to being in the limelight of this niche industry that's full of a lot of judgment and people thinking that they know me, thinking that, judging from afar, me cutting against the grain. A big part of my career has been laying a new foundation to a sport that came from a different background than how I've approached it. And that was interjecting a level of commercial to climbing, which was a very male dominated, earthy, some may call dirtbag origin sport. And when I introduced corporate sponsorship and more mainstream magazines and partaking in even the fact that I'm very feminine as an athlete, I've learned through my career to just lean into who I am because I'm not going to change the opinions of people that don't know me, regardless of whether I cater to them or not. So I think that it's been a rocky road because I have gone through judgment. I've gone through cyberbullying. I've gone through, that came from a very long background of harassment through my career from when I was a teenager. And I've learned my own voice and I've learned how to stick up for myself largely because of who I surround myself in person with and whose opinions I allow to percolate the surface of who I am. But that's a continual journey. It's I don't think, at least for me, I'm at the point that other people's opinions don't affect me. I just put in the work towards working towards them affecting me less. And, I'd love to be a duck where criticism just rolls off my back. And ideally I get to that place. But in large part, that was a big part of why I'm really excited to release this book, because I've had other people tell my narrative for me. And I've never been able to be, outside of the fleeting world of social media, been able to be hey, this is actually from my lens and this is my experience. And so that's why I approached it very vulnerable and very real and honest. And I think that my haters probably won't even read it. But in doing that, it was I'm not trying to cater to the people that already have a preconceived notion of me. And I think that that's been just a continual realization for me in my career, and a level of confidence that you have to build of there will always be haters. And as soon as there's not haters, that means that you're kind of growing into irrelevancy. And maybe that sucks more.
Right. I think that there is a place, we always, I know you mentioned judgment, and I think about that a lot. I remember on Oprah, I might have mentioned this before on the show, the common denominator of all humans, men, women, children, she interviewed over 30 years, is the need for some reason, us as humans, we need that validation. We need that validation of feelings. It's the hardest thing to shake, and we're also, at the same time, searching for freedom. We want to be free, free from judgment. I think, I have meditation practice. I'm not going to judge myself, right? If you give on to others, what's inside is what's outside. So, no judgment on self, and constantly thinking, I don't know this person's whole story. If I don't want judgment on myself, I'm not going to judge anybody else ever again, right? Intentional work to that. It's ongoing always, but you have to shoot for those possibilities, right? And I know you do a lot of work, kind of that flow state, which we talked about. I think that that helps. You take a vision. We're here. There was millions and billions of people before us, and that'll go on, and we'll just be here. But it's what you put out in this world to the best of our ability, right? So I definitely recognize that. But I also know in kind of your entrepreneurial spirit, you have a superfood bar, right? Send.
Yeah.
How is that?
Send.
How is that side, right? Because it's all this other side of mindset, and now you kind of be an entrepreneur. How is that for you as a businesswoman?
It's been amazing. Honestly, I think that because it's something that I believe in so much, it's like, so my background within climbing really led me to found this company. I always made my own bars. Even when I was in my college dorm, I had all these healthy ingredients that I would blend together in my college dorm at Columbia. And I would bring them on my trips because I have celiac disease, so I can't eat gluten. And I'm also hyper aware of what I put into my body, and having real whole food was one of them. And on the market, I just didn't have anything that I trusted. Like everything's over processed, chock full of cane sugar, packaged in different ways, has natural flavoring, which has zero FDA regulation. So
Right,
natural. Yeah,
right,
everything's
exactly,
natural in
right.
this world.
I got that.
So what I really wanted to create was something that I could actually eat. And it was actually a name that I registered in 2012 and didn't actually start until I went through double hip reconstruction surgery. And I started learning more about nutrition as a way for me to come back as an athlete. And that was being very intentional over what I put into my body and what I could control and what I couldn't control. I couldn't even get myself to go to the bathroom alone for like weeks on end because I had just had my pelvic bone broken into 4 different places over 2 10-hour open hip surgeries. And so going into like finding your purpose, finding similar to on an expedition, like control the variables you can control. That's how I approached in business too, was let me build a team of people that fill the voids of my weaknesses and build this, I think, company, at least what I strive for is like the transparency and the honesty and the communication and believing in what we're doing. And so, yeah, I launched the company a year ago and it's been a really fun ride. I mean, we're small and we're constantly learning and making adjustments, but having a product that I really believe in and that I will fuel myself with because it has all real food and nothing is hidden. And it has adaptogens built into it. So the concept of nutrient timing of like why you put different fuel into your body when, with medicinal mushrooms being something that's like a part of a journey that I've learned a lot about, of like chaga is one of the ingredients we use, which has highest concentration of any other food on the planet, which is amazing for regulating your inflammatory state. So different ingredients like that were really interesting to me, but I was like, bottom line, like they need to taste good and we need to all feel like they are something that we can eat. So that was kind of the first stepping stone, but I have to get sun bars out to your audience since we're talking about them. But yeah, it's been a cool, sport to business has a lot of overlap.
And I'll tell you something, I speak to a lot of friends that kind of have mature in their companies and they miss that first couple years, that startup years, that insanity of what that is, right? If you love it, right? And they're happy, but they do have that desire for that. But I want to say, first of all, congratulations on, as you said, writing a truthful, vulnerable book, Take the Lead. I want to wish you much success in that. Myself, I'm still working through, writing the book, but so much comes out, and the fact you actually publish it, put it out, tremendous read. So I recommend it to everybody. But what is now that you're done, wrote the book, coming out this week, what is your kind of key emotion, key takeaway from that journey about the book that people should look out for?
I would say lean into being you. and be unabashedly unapologetic about it. Because like you mentioned, it's a human instinct to seek approval from others. And when you're doing something different, inevitably you're not going to have that. And I think through learning the book, through learning of my process of writing the book, I realized a lot about me. So it's exciting that you're writing a book because, you go back into these very foundational memories of like childhood and interactions, and you learn about ways in which people close to you have affected you and helped shape you. But also, you realize that the people around you and the people that you love are really the opinions that count. There's going to be like a million opinions out there, especially in the day and age that we live in with the chaotic insanity of, the internet. And I think that when you can start understanding that the best that you can do is be you and be open to others and listen to others and formulate an opinion that's just educated based off of everything that you collect and know, hopefully that's a takeaway within my book and an inspiration for others to charge on their own path.
That is definitely a great lesson, because that's all you can do, right? They always say, I think it was Les Brown, motivational speaker. He said, all you can do is all you can do, and all you can do is enough. And that's really the truth. Like, it's like looking here, looking there. It's always inside, always.
It has to be.
That's right. What is something in this moment that you're grateful for?
I'm grateful for my network of just family and friends and loved ones. I'm actually, I guess this is coming out after, but my wedding is next week, which is kind of bizarre, but there's a lot of that feeling of like, I'm so thankful for the love in my life. Like, I just feel it. And I feel like I'm at this moment where I haven't done everything I want to do. I don't know entirely what the future looks like. I've written my first chapter and the next book is currently being written. And that was something that held me back from even releasing this book in the first place, was when do you write your book? Do you wait until the finish line when you feel like everything you've done is done, or do you just dive in and tell your first chapter? And that's the decision point that I came to, was seeing this as my first book and my first chapter change. And that inflection point is really what drove me to dive in and get, into the nitty gritty of me growing up and going through life's lessons and challenges through my own career in climbing. But there's still a big career ahead of me. So, I'm thankful for the people that I love in my life that are around me.
And I'm going to tell you one point, because you're obviously a very strong woman. And I told this to my wife the other day, and it was just crystal clear. If female leaders can get together and literally bring towards the same mission, towards the mission of trying to change positive in this world, more than anybody else, they can do it. They can do it. So stay strong, keep pushing forward. I want to thank you so much for the interview. And congratulations on your wedding as well. Congratulations on your wedding. It should go well. Only happiness, only blessings. How could people find out more about you and follow you?
On social media across Facebook, Instagram, X, Threads, I'm at Sasha DiGiulian. So same name. And that's the best way to get in touch and follow along.
Well, thank you so much, Sasha. It's really been a pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Shout out to your audience.
Awesome. Please subscribe to the show so you don't miss an episode, and follow us on YouTube and Facebook at Popack, and on Instagram at Common Denominator. Have a great day, and I'll talk to you again soon.